Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive.
Yeah.
We always like to take a look at what's happening in the media industry.
Yeah.
And today we're going to be looking at a collection of reports from around the world
Mm-hmm.
from March 28, 2025. That's last Friday, so very, very fresh.
All the latest.
All the latest. And it's a real global look at film, TV, digital media, and everything in between.
Yeah. A real mix of stories this week. Some surprising developments, actually.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating collection. And our mission, as always, is to extract those key insights,
Exactly.
the interesting bits that help us understand what's going on in the world of media.
Yeah, so we're gonna be looking at everything from the debut trailer of a Georgian psychological thriller that's
Oh,
going to Cannes, which is a huge, film festival,
yeah.
to the surprising success of a Palestinian documentary.
Yeah,
We're also going to look at why the magic of Studio Ghibli still indoors,
right.
even with AI trying to imitate it, and we're going to delve into the ongoing struggles of streaming services.
Yeah.
And how major YouTube creators are now competing for traditional TV advertising budgets.
That's a big one.
It is.
Yeah, that's interesting. So are you ready to dive in?
Let's do it.
Okay, so let's start with the global film scene, shall we?
Sounds good.
And one of the first things that caught my eye was the release of the trailer for April,
Okay.
a psychological thriller by the Georgian director Dia Kulembegashvili, who made the film Beginning, which I believe you've seen.
Yes, I have. Beginning was a very striking film, a real,
Yeah.
kind of a slow burn, but really intense.
Yes, a very distinctive style.
Yeah, I think April looks like it's going to be in a similar vein.
Yeah, set in a remote village exploring themes of isolation and surveillance. It's premiering at Cannes this year.
So that's a big deal. Cannes is, a very prestigious film festival.
Yes, definitely one to watch out for.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of films making an impact, there's this Palestinian documentary called No Other Land
Right.
that has grossed over $1 million worldwide, which is incredible for an independent documentary.
Yeah.
It focuses on life in the occupied West Bank, and it was created by a Palestinian-Israeli team.
That's interesting.
It's a really interesting collaboration, and it's won awards at several festivals.
Oh,
But it's also faced censorship in some regions,
right.
which, sadly is not surprising given the subject matter. But I think that just underlines the power of the film.
Absolutely. Yeah, that it's sparking these conversations and that it's, obviously controversial
Exactly.
for some, but yeah, that's really interesting.
It is. And then we have something completely different, a film called Invention
Okay.
by Courtney Stevens,
Okay.
starring Callie Hernandez, who won Best Performance at Locarno last year.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And it's a very personal exploration of grief, it seems,
Okay.
blending fiction and autobiography.
Interesting.
It is, and it uses an experimental healing device and archival footage to reflect on American cultural nostalgia.
Wow.
Yeah, it's having its U.S. premiere on April 4th.
Okay, so one to look out for.
Definitely if you like experimental cinema.
Yep, absolutely.
Yep.
Now let's talk about Studio Ghibli.
Oh, yes.
The article highlights the enduring appeal of Princess Mononoke
One of their classics.
and the backlash against AI-generated imitations of Ghibli's style.
Right.
And this is so interesting to me because it really speaks to Hayao Miyazaki's, core belief in original human creativity.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's something about that hand-drawn animation style that people really respond to. It's
the warmth. It's that human touch.
yeah, it's like you can almost feel the artist's hand in every frame.
And there's this environmental angle, too, because the article mentions the environmental cost associated with generative AI.
Which is something we don't often think about.
No, we don't.
We think of AI as being very clean and, high tech, but actually it has a real environmental footprint.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting to see this pushback against AI mimicking Ghibli's artistry, It kind of emphasizes the value that we place on that human touch and the emptiness of purely algorithmic creations.
Yeah, it's like we crave that authenticity.
Yes.
That sense that a real person has poured their heart and soul into something.
Exactly. And you can't really replicate that with an algorithm.
Not yet, anyway.
Not yet, anyway.
Maybe someday.
Maybe someday. All right, let's move on to some festival news.
Okay.
The Sundance Film Festival is relocating to Boulder, Colorado, starting in 2027,
Oh, wow.
after over 4 decades in Park City, Utah.
That's a big change.
It is a big change, and apparently it's being driven by a $34 million package of tax incentives.
Okay.
and the promise of enhanced accessibility.
Right. So maybe it'll be easier for people to get to and participate in.
Exactly.
It'll be interesting to see how that impacts the festival.
Yeah, absolutely. And finally, in the film world, let's talk about Film Art 2025,
Okay.
a major industry event in Hong Kong.
Yes.
And it seems like a big story this year was a shift in power away from traditional Hollywood dominance, with lots of buzz around Asian content.
Especially Chinese animation
Right.
and Southeast Asian horror.
Yeah, really interesting genres there.
Yeah, and it makes sense, I think. You know, the Asian market is huge and it's growing rapidly.
Yes,
And there's a real appetite for content that reflects their own cultures and experiences.
absolutely.
But it's not all rosy, though.
No.
There are still some challenges.
Yeah.
Film Art also highlighted the economic disparities within the industry
Right.
and the challenges of media consolidation for smaller companies.
Yes.
And there's a big push towards co-productions as a way to navigate these challenges, you know, to pool resources and make films that can appeal to a wider audience.
Right.
The impact of AI is still a big unknown.
Yes.
You know, people are excited about the possibilities, but also worried about the potential downsides.
Absolutely.
And there are concerns about the rise of low-quality vertical short dramas,
Right.
which some people see as a threat to more traditional forms of filmmaking.
I can see why they would be concerned.
Yeah. And I think a key takeaway from Film Art is that these industry gatherings are increasingly about understanding market trends and forging partnerships
Yes.
rather than just about making immediate sales.
Yeah, kind of shifting the focus from just transactions to building relationships.
Exactly.
Okay. That's the global film scene.
Quite a lot going on,
There's a lot going on.
as always.
Now let's shift gears and talk about streaming,
Okay.
which, as we know, is in a constant state of flux.
It is ever-changing.
It is ever-changing, and a major theme that's emerging right now is streaming fatigue.
Yeah, that's real.
I think a lot of people are feeling it.
And the data backs it up. Antenna has reported that SVOD churn, you know, the rate at which people are canceling their streaming subscriptions, has doubled in the last 2 years.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, and retention rates have fallen to just 15%,
Oof.
which is really low.
Yeah.
So people are signing up for these services and then they're canceling them very quickly.
And what are the reasons for this?
Well, a lot of it comes down to user experience.
Okay.
People are complaining about clunky interfaces, difficulties, finding things to watch.
Right.
They're spending too much time searching for content. Apparently, the average person spends 110 hours a year just searching.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, that's almost 5 full days.
That's ridiculous.
It is ridiculous.
And, you know, I feel that. I definitely feel that.
Yeah, and then you add to that the lack of personalization,
Yeah.
the increasing number of ads,
Right.
the fact that different streaming platforms don't really work together seamlessly, you know, what we call a lack of interoperability.
Right.
And it's just a recipe for frustration.
It is. It's a recipe for giving up.
Yeah, and I think that's what we're seeing. The report even noted a 6% daily decrease in media consumption across all formats.
Wow.
So people aren't just switching from one streaming service to another, they're just consuming less media overall.
Yeah, I think there's this sense of overwhelm. Like, you know, you open up Netflix or you open up whatever streaming service, and it's just this wall of content.
So much choice.
Too much choice. And it's paralyzing.
Yeah, and then you end up just scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, and then you're like, oh, it's 11 o'clock. I haven't actually watched anything.
Exactly. Exactly. All right, let's go to Australia, where the situation with mandated streaming quotas is a little unclear.
Yeah, it's a bit of a mess, actually.
Okay.
The Australian government has delayed making any decisions on whether to require streaming platforms to invest a certain percentage of their revenue in local Australian content. You know, there were discussions about this, there were proposals, but the recent federal budget didn't provide any firm timelines.
And this is creating a lot of uncertainty in the Australian media industry
Absolutely.
because, you know, they need to plan productions. They need to know what the rules are going to be.
Exactly.
And without that clarity, it's really difficult to move forward.
Yeah, and it's not just about the money, it's about the stories. You know, Australian filmmakers want to tell Australian stories, and they need the support to do that.
Absolutely. And they need to know that that support is going to be there.
Yeah.
So it's a tricky situation.
It is now, in contrast to that, we have France, which is taking a much more proactive stance.
Right.
They have something called the SMAD decree,
Right.
which legally requires streaming platforms like Netflix and Disney Plus to invest 20% of their revenue generated in France into domestic and European content.
Okay.
So they're not messing around.
No, they're not.
They're saying if you want to do business in France, you have to support our local industry.
Right.
And we've seen Disney Plus actually negotiate a 9-month window for theatrical releases in exchange for committing 25% of their revenue.
Wow. So they're really trying to find a way to work within the system.
Yeah, they're trying to make it work for them.
And they invested 75 million euros in theatrical movies in 2023.
No.
So it's not just talk.
No, it's real money.
Yeah, it's a very different approach to Australia's more hesitant one.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about some executive changes.
Okay.
Janine Weigold is leaving her role as head of kids and family content for the EMEA region at Netflix.
Interesting.
She joined the company in 2022, so it's been a relatively short stint.
Yeah, and she oversaw a lot of animated and live-action programming.
Yes.
So it'll be interesting to see who replaces her and what direction they take the department in.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, finally, in the streaming world, Max in France is offering a bundle that includes a Max subscription along with news access from Le Monde and Télérama.
Okay, that's a clever move.
For $14.99 a month.
Yeah, because they're bundling their streaming service with these well-respected news sources, so they're trying to appeal to a wider audience.
Yeah, and I think it's also a way to add value.
Absolutely.
In a very competitive market.
Yeah, you got to stand out somehow.
And I think this is a way for them to do that.
It's a good strategy.
Okay, let's move on to the power of creators.
All right.
Because they are making some serious waves in the media landscape.
They are.
And one really interesting development is that Spotter, a company that licenses the video catalogs of creators, recently held its first advertising upfront presentation.
Oh, wow.
And this was a big deal because top YouTubers like MrBeast, Dude Perfect, Kinigra Dion,
huge names,
presented their upcoming programming directly to advertisers.
Wow.
With the aim of attracting advertising budgets that have traditionally gone to television networks.
So they're basically positioning themselves as the new networks.
Yes. Essentially, they're saying we have the audience, we have the engagement, and we can offer you the same kind of reach and impact as a traditional TV network.
And they're offering branded content integrations and broader media partnerships as well.
Exactly.
So it's not just about running ads, it's about collaborating with these creators.
It's about becoming part of their world.
Exactly.
And I think that's really appealing to advertisers.
It is, and it's a real shift in power, you know?
Yeah. Yes.
Traditionally, these creators would have had to go through a network to get access to these kinds of budgets. But now they're going directly to the advertisers.
They're cutting out the middleman.
Exactly.
And I think that's a sign of how much influence they now have.
Absolutely. And I think this is just the beginning.
Yeah. I think so, too. Now, let's turn our attention to traditional media.
Okay.
Which is clearly navigating a period of significant transformation.
It is. They're having to adapt to a rapidly changing landscape.
Yes, and in the UK, there's a lot of debate about the future of BBC Two.
Right.
You know, with viewing habits changing and a lot of content moving to iPlayer or BBC One, there's this question of whether BBC Two is still relevant.
Yeah. Is it worth keeping, or should they just scrap it?
Or should they rebrand it? You know, should they find a new way to position it?
Right, because it's competing with its own streaming service now.
Exactly.
So they need to figure out what its unique selling point is.
Yes, and speaking of channels facing change, ITV has officially canceled Dancing on Ice after 19 seasons.
Oh, wow.
Which is a long run.
It is. It's a very popular show as well.
Yes. But they cited evolving viewer habits and the need to refresh their entertainment slate as the reasons behind the cancellation.
Right. So I guess they're just trying to keep up with the times.
Yeah. You know what's working, what's not working.
Yeah. And sometimes you have to say goodbye to the old to make way for the new.
Exactly. Okay, now let's move on to premium entertainment experiences.
Okay.
Which are thriving in the post-pandemic world.
Yeah, people are willing to pay for a really good experience.
Yeah, they want something special.
Yeah.
And premium cinema formats like IMAX and Dolby Cinema are driving a lot of this growth. In 2023, there were over 7,800 premium screens worldwide.
Wow.
And they accounted for 15.6% of the total North American box office revenue in 2024.
That's huge.
It's a big chunk of the market.
It is.
And it shows that people are willing to pay a premium for that immersive, high-quality cinematic experience.
Yeah, it's like they're saying, I want to get out of the house,
Yes.
but I want it to be worth my while.
Exactly. And IMAX is the global leader in terms of number of screens, but Dolby Cinema actually generates higher revenue per screen.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so it seems like people are really responding to the Dolby Cinema technology and presentation.
Yeah, it must be a really special experience.
And it shows the importance of innovation.
Yeah.
Giving people a reason to go to the cinema.
Yeah, you can't just show them the same old thing. You have to offer them something they can't get at home.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, let's talk about a new documentary on Apple TV+.
Okay.
It's called Fight for Glory, 2024 World Series, and it chronicles the Los Angeles Dodgers' recent championship win.
Nice.
And it's directed by R.J. Cutler.
Okay.
And produced by Imagine Entertainment, with Derek Jeter as an executive producer.
Wow. So it's got some big names attached.
Yes. And I think sports documentaries are really interesting because they often go beyond just the games themselves.
Yeah, they tell the human stories, the stories of the players, the coaches, the fans.
The struggles, the triumphs.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes them so compelling.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, let's take a look at some recent executive appointments and industry developments.
Okay.
The South Australian Film Corporation has appointed Kirsty Parker as their first ever First Nations head.
That's fantastic.
Which is a really important step towards supporting Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander screen storytellers.
Yeah, it's great to see them taking that step towards greater representation.
Absolutely.
And Legendary Entertainment has hired Brian Worsley as their new Senior Vice President of Marketing and Creative Advertising.
Okay.
He comes from Warner Bros., where he worked on some really big marketing campaigns.
Okay, so they've brought in someone with a lot of experience.
Yeah, they're clearly looking to up their marketing game.
Okay, and the Television Academy is launching the Televerse Festival in June 2025.
Oh, interesting. What's that all about?
It's a series of panels, screenings, and fan-focused events leading up to the Emmy nominations.
Okay, so they're trying to build excitement for the Emmys.
Yes, and I think they're also trying to reach a younger and more diverse audience.
Makes sense.
Yeah, they want to keep the Emmys relevant.
Yeah, it's a smart move.
And Ruth Berry from ITV Studios has said that she's seeing signs of recovery in the international scripted market.
That's good news.
It is good news.
Especially after the last few years, which have been pretty tough.
Yes.
She said that buyers are more willing to invest in fresh voices and innovative projects.
Okay, so there's a bit more optimism in the air.
Yeah, it seems like things are looking up.
And at Series Mania, Lisa Kramer from Paramount Global Content Distribution and Lindsay Martin from CBS Studios talked about their strategies for international co-productions.
Okay.
They're looking for globally appealing and commercially viable series, particularly in genres like crime and thrillers.
Right.
But also exploring opportunities in lighter comedic fare.
Okay.
And they emphasize the importance of English language storytelling and securing pre-sale agreements.
Yeah, that makes sense. You know, you want to minimize the risk. And English language content tends to travel well internationally.
Absolutely. And there's a growing trend among European broadcasters to form co-production alliances.
Right.
Like the Alliance in Nordic 12.
Yeah, these are groups of broadcasters from different countries
who are pooling their resources to co-finance and co-produce content.
And it's a smart way for them to compete with the global streaming platforms.
Exactly.
Because they can share the costs and they can also reach a wider audience.
Yes, and the BBC and ZDF have recently formed a partnership for high-end drama collaboration.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it's happening at all levels.
Yeah, it's definitely a trend.
Okay, let's talk about some talent news.
Okay.
Ryan Reynolds' production company, Maximum Effort, has signed an overall deal with 20th Television.
That's a big deal.
It is.
He's really expanding his production ambitions.
Yes, and I think he's got a good eye for projects.
Yeah, he seems to know what audiences want.
And in terms of production infrastructure, Halon Entertainment is opening a new animation and virtual production studio in Glasgow, Scotland.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's a $36 million investment.
Wow.
And it's a sign that production capabilities are expanding beyond the traditional hubs.
Yeah, it makes sense. You know, there's a lot of talent in other parts of the world.
And it's probably more cost-effective to produce in some of these places as well.
Absolutely.
And finally, in terms of industry development, Japan is extending its film production incentive program.
Okay.
Which offers rebates of up to 50% on production costs.
Wow, that's generous.
It is.
So they're really trying to attract international productions.
Yeah, and it's already supported a number of notable collaborations.
Yeah, I think we're going to see a lot more films being made in Japan in the coming years.
I think so, too.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to some specific film and TV projects.
All right, let's see what's coming up.
Arte France and Movistar Plus Plus are partnering to produce a series called The Anatomy of a Moment.
Okay.
Based on Javier Cercas's novel about the attempted coup d'etat in Spain in 1981.
Interesting.
Yeah, and Alvaro Morte is starring in it.
Oh, cool.
So that sounds promising.
Yeah, definitely one to watch.
Production has wrapped on Dead Letters, starring Margot Martindale as a truck driver confronting her past.
Okay.
And the cast also includes Stephen Root and Yalitza Aparicio.
Oh, wow, that's a great cast.
Yeah, sounds like a really good one.
I'll be checking that out.
Halle Bailey and Regé-Jean Page are set to star in a new film from Universal Pictures called Italiana.
Okay.
Plot details are still under wraps, but with those two actors, it's sure to generate some buzz.
Yeah, they're both very talented.
Yes.
And very popular.
Studio Lambert has optioned a novel about the Dr. Crippen murder case.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Amanda Coe is reportedly writing the adaptation.
Okay.
So that could be really interesting.
Yeah, that's a fascinating case.
It is, full of twists and turns.
And Disney is close to finalizing a deal for a new crime film directed by Martin Scorsese.
Oh, wow.
Set in Hawaii.
Okay.
Starring Dwayne Johnson, Leonardo DiCaprio, and Emily Blunt.
Wow, that's a powerhouse cast.
It is. And it's based on the true story of a 1970s Hawaiian mob boss. Okay, so it's got that classic Scorsese vibe.
Yes, very much so.
I can't wait to see that one.
Ariane Mondi has joined the cast of a psychological thriller called Hostage.
Okay.
And CBS is in talks for another Yellowstone spinoff series.
Really?
Yeah, this one would potentially star Luke Grimes.
Okay, so they're really milking that franchise.
They are, but it's very successful.
Yeah, people love it.
So why not?
Fair enough.
Production on Angels in the Asylum, starring Simon Pegg, has been halted due to funding issues.
Oh, that's a shame.
It is.
It sounded like an interesting project.
Yeah, based on true events in a 1930s asylum.
Yeah, too bad.
The trailer has been released for Paul Thomas Anderson's new film, One Battle After Another, starring Leonardo DiCaprio.
Okay.
It's a political satire inspired by Thomas Pynchon.
Wow, that's ambitious.
It is.
Paul Thomas Anderson always goes big.
He does.
I'm curious to see what he does with that.
And Alyssa Milano has joined Bobby Fairley's upcoming comedy, Driver's Ed.
Okay.
Sky Italia is developing an Italian adaptation of Tempting Fortune.
Interesting.
The French-Canadian music competition format Zenith has secured format deals in Brazil and Mexico.
Okay, so it's going global.
Yes.
That's always a good sign for a format.
Channel 4 has a new show called Undercover Education, which combines a prank show with a mentorship program.
That's an interesting mix.
It is.
I wonder how that's going to work.
Yeah, we'll have to see.
Josh Brolin is in talks to join Austin Abrams in a survival thriller called Whale Fall,
Okay.
about a diver who gets trapped inside the carcass of a sperm whale.
Wow, that's a unique premise.
It is.
I'm not sure I'd want to watch that.
Yeah, it sounds pretty intense.
And finally, an untitled comedy project is in the works at Amazon MGM Studios with Billy Eichner, Will Ferrell, and Zac Efron.
Wow, that's a lot of comedic talent.
It is. They're going to have to make a really big movie to accommodate all those egos.
Yeah, but if they can pull it off, it could be hilarious.
Absolutely. Okay, let's move on to some deals and sales.
All right, let's see who's buying what.
Celluloid Dreams has boarded sales for 2 new Taiwanese films. Silver Lake has acquired a minority stake in Peyton Manning's Omaha Productions.
Interesting.
Yeah, so they're investing in sports content.
Makes sense.
Channel 4 has acquired the Icelandic thriller series The Darkness.
Okay.
Insight Productions and Group Fairplay are forging a pact for bilingual unscripted content in Canada.
Right, so they're catering to both the English and French-speaking markets.
Exactly.
It's a smart move.
Joe Franco's Dreams has secured multiple sales via The Match Factory.
Okay.
Intermedia has added 8 miniseries, from Turkish streamer Exen to its catalog.
So Turkish drama continues to be popular internationally.
Yes.
Beta Film has boarded the Norwegian YA short-form drama Rebound. And Zigzag Productions is developing a climate doc for TNT Sports and has secured a 3rd season renewal for Football Academy.
Okay, great.
So lots of activity in the international market.
Yes, absolutely. Now let's wrap up with some renewals and cancellations.
Okay.
We already mentioned that ITV has officially canceled Dancing on Ice.
Right.
But CBS has renewed the Sherlock Holmes spinoff, Watson, for a 2nd season.
Okay, good news for the fans.
And finally, the Sunny Coast Showdown in Australia is launching a new initiative called Showdown Max 2025,
Okay.
which will provide $250,000 in funding to support local screen-based projects.
That's fantastic.
It is a great opportunity for emerging talent.
Yeah, it's so important to support new voices.
Absolutely.
Well, that was a very comprehensive deep dive.
It was, wasn't it?
We covered a lot of ground.
We did, from the global film scene to the challenges of streaming, to the power of creators,
And everything in between.
and everything in between.
It's amazing how interconnected all these things are.
It is. You know, it really highlights the complex and constantly evolving nature of the media industry.
Yeah. And it makes you wonder what the future holds.
It does, doesn't it? You know, we're seeing this rise of independent creator platforms.
Right.
And these ongoing challenges with user experience, on traditional streaming services. And it makes you wonder, what does this mean for the future of media consumption?
Yeah, will we all be watching content on individual creator platforms?
Or will the streaming giants find a way to adapt?
Or will something completely new merge?
Yeah, who knows? But it's certainly an exciting time to be following this industry.
It is.
So thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And until our next exploration, keep watching and keep exploring.